For those who aren't aware, Hideo Kojima recently attended San Diego Comic-Con 2019 to participate in a panel alongside film director Nicholas Winding Refn, and the panel was hosted by Jeff Keighley. There, Kojima shared some new information about Death Stranding, which I talked about in one of my recent videos. He talked about Refn's character Heartman, who he revealed dies every 21 minutes and stays in the world of the dead for 3 minutes, where he searches for his family before his automated defibrillator brings him back to life. So in total, he dies and comes back to life 60 times a day. He also shared an interesting anecdote about how Keanu Reeves was at one point among the candidates considered for the role of Cliff, but Kojima obviously ultimately decided that Mads Mikkelsen was a better fit for the role. He also unveiled what the game's final box art would look like, both the plastic case and the steelbook version that comes with the special and collector's edition. Beyond all that, though, Kojima also talked a bit about his philosophy as a video game creator. At one point, Jeff Keighley asked Kojima why it's so important for him to make a game that isn't the same as others, that doesn't just replicate what's already come before. To that, Kojima provided some pretty blunt responses, as can be seen here in this footage of the panel filmed by YouTube user The Grumpy Gibbon.
Why is that so important to you not to just make a game that is, the same as every game that comes before, but with a new plot?
I feel that there's no reason to create something that's already there. I want to create new things and give more stimulation to the world. So it's like Hollywood movies. Some Hollywood movies are like, it doesn't really, even if you see a film, it doesn't really live with you. People just digest it and consume it. So what I do is I want to bring something different for people to maybe difficult to chew and chow down, so that it really leaves a mark when you digest my works. And then move forward in your life because you remember that feeling, and I want to give that kind of stimulation when I create my games. So yes, I think we're both alike with Nicholas. I mean, a lot of people love it, a lot of people sometimes hate it, and we get two sides of criticism sometimes and praises at the same time. So, but what happens is at the release of, like, for instance, Nicholas' movie or my games, people might say, ooh, or people might praise it, but after 5 or 10 years, people will really start to evaluate what it was about, meaning it leaves a mark to everyone to think about, same as 2001 Space Odyssey or Blade Runner. So I want to create those kind of things. So when I first started my own production, the easiest way to make money was to create something online on an island that everyone goes and shoots each other, but I didn't want to make that.
So yeah, obviously when Kojima's talking about games in which players are dropped on an island and shoot each other, he's talking about Battle Royale. He's sort of low-key calling the genre a cash grab, which it kind of is. This is a genre that really blew up with PUBG and then became mainstream with Fortnite, and ever since, other game companies have desperately tried to replicate that kind of success. Battle Royale is very much the trend the video game industry's chasing right now, and it's a lot easier for a game developer to pursue a genre that's trending rather than create something entirely new that others will want to chase. The end result is that the Battle Royale genre has become oversaturated, and creativity suffers because it just becomes about chasing that money and that popularity rather than about pursuing to become an industry leader who create experiences that push the boundaries of the medium, that make people go, wow, I've never thought of this, this is something different, I want more of this. Say what you want about Kojima and about the sort of crazy types of games he makes, but one thing we can't fault him for is not trying to break the mold. That's what I absolutely love about his games and his endeavors. Rarely does anything he does feel normal, and that's not always to everyone's taste, but I think we need more creative forces that think outside the box like that, which is why Death Stranding to me is such a compelling title, despite barely knowing anything about it, and I think the fact that there's such an air of enigma and mystery surrounding this game is what keeps people drawn to it. I feel like even those who are skeptical about this title are at least on some level curious to see how this game pans out, how the narrative comes together, how the trailers will come to make sense once we see the full context, once the final game launches, what the gameplay will be like, because from the footage that's out there right now and what little information we have gotten of the game, Death Stranding doesn't look like anything that currently exists in video games or even in films. Whereas when you look at a Battle Royale, I feel like a lot of people's immediate reaction will be like, ugh, another one? I mean, the fact that people applauded Kojima's statement about not wanting to do another Battle Royale should inform you a great deal about general sentiment. It's just no longer interesting because it's been done to hell and back at this point. It all just feels so uninspired. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with wanting to make a Battle Royale game, especially if developers really try to put their own spin on it, but it is definitely more of a cheap and easy route to take. It's the least creatively demanding thing to do for the most amount of potential profit. I'm certainly glad Kojima didn't go that route. I'm certainly glad we can look forward to something really out there amidst the sort of traditional experiences we have come to know. I also love what he said about wanting to create games that are hard to chew and swallow, that may take years before people really look at it in depth, rather than ones that are easy to mindlessly digest and consume, because the former are the ones we ultimately remember in the long run, and the ones that live with us for years and years and years, and that we take to our grave, even if some of these experiences can be out there and divisive, with out there and divisive being perfect ways to describe Kojima's games and many of the most highly regarded and memorable games out there right now. That type of game is definitely harder and riskier to develop, but I think ultimately more fulfilling for the creators and for consumers alike. It's so much easier but so much less satisfying to create something that's just a spin on something that exists. Whereas when you create something truly new, something truly unique, and people receive it with open arms, I mean, that has to be the greatest feeling in the world. Now, while this is where the filmed segment stops, shortly after Kojima shared his philosophy, Nicholas Winding Refn chimed in with a few comments which were transcribed by Twitter user Kalai. Here's what he added on top of Kojima's sentiments. Creativity is what moves civilizations forward. We're living in an era when creativity is dictated by algorithms that it becomes meaningless almost. It's important to counter that, and creativity is an individual experience in a collective medium. Hideo and I enjoy destroying good taste, which is a destroyer of creativity. You either love or hate it because that's life. You know, if it means breaking down creative barriers, I'm all for creators aiming to destroy typical, boring, quote-unquote good taste. It's kind of sad for me to think about how so few major developers and publishers these days think with this kind of mindset. As Refn said, creative decisions lately are dictated by algorithms, by the thing that will generate the highest numbers and revenue. It's exactly why so many AAA publishers are pushing for the normalization of live services, because algorithmically, that's where the big bucks are at. That's where you drive maximum engagement and monetization. That's what pleases investors and raises stocks and all of that stuff. It's why we keep hearing from executives these false declarations of how single-player games are no longer as coveted as they were a decade or two ago, and yet we keep hearing success story after success story of titles like Spider-Man for PS4, which recently became the highest-selling superhero video game of all time, and it achieved this despite releasing on a single platform, the PS4. And this is one of those games where shady monetization schemes don't come into play. This is a game made purely out of passion and out of love, and it shows, and people were receptive to it. They received this game with open arms, and it got all kinds of critical acclaim, and there was no integrity sacrificed. Whereas with a lot of other AAA titles, it's not about what players want, it's about what publishers algorithmically want from their products, and to that end, they will push these narratives and propagandas and business tactics that suit their agenda. In the AAA landscape, it's becoming rarer and rarer to see projects entirely fueled by creativity, which is why I never take creators like Kojima, CD Projekt Red, Nintendo, many of those first-party Sony studios, many indie developers, you name it, for granted. Even if they don't always make games that appeal to everyone, they have the mentality that you create a product you're passionate about with no creative restrictions and corporate mandate. They understand that if you create something special from a place of passion, from from an honest place, the product will sell itself. Algorithms and trends and all this other bullshit be damned. The way I see Kojima is that he's not really a traditional AAA developer, but rather an indie AAA developer. That's the way I like to put it. Those who've played a lot of indie games will know that they have some of the most insane concepts and execution. And Death Stranding is similar in that regard. It reminds me of an indie game, except it's backed up by the resources of a AAA project and of a longtime industry veteran and legend. I feel like Death Stranding is a fusion of indie mentality and AAA resources, and although I don't think Death Stranding is a game that will appeal to everyone, while I don't think it will be Fortnite or Call of Duty level of mainstream, it's looking like it's going to be thought-provoking, an experience that I won't mindlessly consume, but rather really take my time chewing and swallowing, something that I feel like I'll remember for a long time. One thing I can rest assured knowing is that Death Stranding won't be bland, generic, typical, and given Kojima's track record, I know the game will actually play well and will feel super polished, so all around I'm looking forward to playing this game more than most titles because I get the sense that it will be stimulating in ways that most other games just simply aren't these days. Or at the very least, Kojima has that intent, though whether he succeeds in that endeavor remains to be seen, and I suppose we'll find out when the game launches on November 8th, 2019. Regardless of how this game pans out, it gets my full endorsement because it's being made for the right reasons, with a resolute mindset of putting creativity and a unique identity above everything else. These are one man's thoughts and opinions anyway. I'd love to hear what your take is on Kojima taking a shot at Battle Royale and his philosophy on creativity in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.